big shout out to commenter and subscriber S3P8472, because in my Monster Masters video, in which I talk about Loki's relationship to Lola, and then Lola marrying Gotti, and then her sister's relationship to her freaky husband Capone, he brings up that Loki could be inspired by a Japanese myth. This is coming about because I often say now that it's very possible in the future that Loki could have a canonical version of the mini fruit, because it's quite odd in other places in the franchise, such as video games and anime fillers. We have Albathian giants who are associated with Brocky and Dory who have the mini fruit. But there are no shrinking abilities in One Piece just yet. But we do have a bunch of growing abilities, a lot of them being associated with Elbaf now, such as the effects of Dami Reversi or the Grow fruit held by the Elbathian Owl Biblo. But he mentions that Loki could be a reference to a Japanese myth called Isunboshi. Isunboshi is a Japanese folklore tale similar to Tom Thumb. It is also called the One Sun Boy, which is interesting. And it's also called in English Little 1 Inch or the Inch High Samurai, in which a small boy who is only an inch tall is born to elderly parents. This child then goes on to the capital to become a samurai. He defeats an Oni. Said Oni has kidnapped the daughter of a chancellor. Then, via a lot of funny trials of the Oni eating Usunboshi and him escaping the Oni's body through its eye and stabbing him repeatedly in the stomach with a needle in some cases, the Oni gives up and runs away, leaving behind a magic hammer. Said hammer allows the boy to grow to 6 feet tall, and then of course he marries the daughter of the Chancellor. Now, with all that being said, how does this fit back into One Piece? One, is interesting that an interpretation of the story's title can be called One Sun Boy. This is interesting because Loki sees himself as the sun deity. Also, a big part of Loki's mythos in One Piece is that he was supposed to marry Charlotte Lola, but Charlotte Lola turned down Loki. So just like Isunboshi, marriage is a part of his story. But in the case of the Oni and the boy, I think in this case, Loki could be both, because in having horns and the weird demon eyes, Loki is the most demonic entity we've seen in One Piece, and possibly the only true giant in One Piece, because no other ancient giant that we've seen has his eyes. So he could be the purest of the pure when it comes to ancient giants in One Piece, which in a way could mean he's the purest of the pure when it comes to more of the demonic races. So your Onis, your ancient giants, etc. So with that being said, when it comes to the shrinking, I do think he has a canonical variation of the mini fruit, which allow its user to shrink down to a maximum of 5 centimeters, which is about 1.9 inches. In the story, Isunboshi is about 1.2 inches. So in that way, I think the mini fruit possibly could have been a reference to this tale the entire time. So Loki perhaps can shrink down to 5 centimeters like Blue or Lily in Stomach before him in that anime special and that video game One Piece Around the Land. So with that being said too, I don't think the hammer is the point of power when it comes to Loki. It presumably can be under the influence of the fruit if the hammer is able to shrink along with him, but I do find it interesting that he is a very proficient hammer user in the series, because of course he's using Ragnar now, which seems to be a very important hammer in Elbaf. So much like in the story of Usunboshi, the hammer does have importance, but we know he had a hammer before Ragnar because we see him with a different hammer when he goes to visit his father Harold, but that's when we find out that Harold has been killed. So he is a very prominent hammer user in One Piece, which is quite interesting considering the contents of the Isenboshi tail. But you should hammer that subscribe button, turning that red button into a gray one, and then hammer the hand of the like button, filling it in. Ring that bell with your mighty hammer so you never miss a video. And if you can find it, give that hype button a smash. Thank you so much. It's very much appreciated. But to continue. But with that being said, too, concerning the fruit that he has, there are two different situations in which an important devil fruit is attributed to Elbaf and to Harold. So these two situations most likely are relating to the same fruit. Because in chapter 1130, we hear about Loki presumably killing his father to obtain this legendary devil fruit passed down through Elbaf. However, then in chapter 1156, it is Zebek who says, to sum it all, there's two devil fruits out there that I want. One of them most likely is found on Elbaf, and its power will only be truly unlocked if Harold eats it. So I think in both cases, he is talking about the mini fruit, and Loki has eaten the mini fruit, or at least the canonical variation of the mini fruit. The reason why I think it's only good in the hands of a giant the size of Harold is because perhaps, unlike its uncanonical counterpart, the mini fruit, this particular fruit maybe multiplies the strength of the person based on how much mass is being condensed into one area. So, other than other ancient giants of a similar size, Loki currently is the biggest normal giant in the series outside of somebody like Samwon Wolf, who has the opposite fruit, presumably the huge fruit. So I think if Loki does indeed have this fruit, it's very powerful in his hands because his strength is multiplied tenfold via the shrinking. And that could mean that the hammer's strength is multiplied tenfold via the shrinking, which presumably is why they are together in the castle of Elbaf. But this is all presumed. We have to wait and see, but it will make a lot of sense if the two treasures are together because they work in tandem with one another. But another reason why I think this is a shrinking fruit is because it would make sense as to why Zebek would want it for Harold, because Harold at that time was the biggest giant known to the series until his son Loki was born. And now that Loki presumably has it, it will make sense too, because now he could fulfill the destiny that Zebek wanted for Harold, and Loki can be on Luffy's ship, because now he would be the size of a normal person, but super strong because of the strength multiplying capabilities of this presumed shrinking fruit. This would also make sense for this said fruit to be on Elbaf because we know Elbafian giants worship Nika. Nika, in the powers of the human fruit model Nika, do include shrinking and growing, because we have seen Luffy shrink before in the pre-time skip after the effects of Gear 3rd had worn off. So shrinking and growing were always a part of the Nika lore. So I think in this way, it would be a very important fruit for a giant to have, because then the giant in question would be able to shrink like Nika, presumably. So with that being said, that's all I have here today. Give me your thoughts and tell your friends about Polypede. What?